On today's show, we've got a very special guest. He's very well known in the world of biblical archaeology, biblical history, Egyptology, all kinds of things. His name is Ahmed Osman. Many of you will know him from books such as this, Moses and Akhenaten, as well as The House of the Messiah. I'm reading off the back. Stranger in the Valley of Kings, and Out of Egypt. Ahmed, thank you very much for joining me on this show. This is really interesting stuff, isn't it? Because this redates all kind of things. It retells the story of all kinds of different things. So, you want to tell us how you got into this and how it all came to you?
It all started a long time ago. I come from Egypt. I have been in England and London for about 44 years now. Right. When I was a young boy, it was 1948 when the State of Israel was established. At that time, there was a conflict between Egypt and the rest of the Arab world and Israel. They didn't want the State of Israel. And I was a young boy of about 14. And to tell you the truth, I was one of these fanatics. It starts always at 14 years. I was very religious and Islamic. I'm Muslim.
Right.
So we were taught, I was part of a group of an Islamic brotherhood. And they told us that we have nothing to lose if we fight the Israelis, the Jews. Because they regard them as the enemy of God. And if I was able to defeat the enemies of God, then I have done it as a victor.
You'll be in paradise.
And if I die in the process, I have nothing to, I immediately, straight away, I'll be in paradise. So, in fact, I tried to enroll for a group, volunteers to go under. But luckily enough, I was under age 14. They wouldn't allow me because they said under 16 you're not allowed.
Right.
So I did go. My brothers who went there were, defeated. I don't know whether they went to paradise or not. But anyhow, the war was over. By the time the Second War was coming about, I started to think. I have already left the Brotherhood and I went into different philosophical kind of try to realize what's going on, who are we, and question things. And they wanted to know an answer.
You started to think for yourself.
It seemed to me at the time, because we were occupied in Egypt by the British,
right,
and the French occupied Syria and Lebanon and North Africa, but eventually they left. They were there to leave sometime. However, I realized that the Israelis, the Jews in Israel, they were claiming they were not coming to occupy and leave sometime in the future. They came to settle. They claimed the same land for themselves. And they had a kind of a holy feeling about it. It is the Bible. God gave them this land as a promised land and so on. So I realized that this same land is claimed as a holy land for both sides. So the war, for me, seemed to be holy not only for us, but for them as well. So I wanted to know whether this holy thing is, what is it? What is behind it? For us Muslims, we only read the Bible. We don't, the Quran. We never read the Bible. So I tried to read the Bible and see what is the holy message there, why they are. So I started to read the Bible, and I realized that the whole thing started when a Hebrew tribe, because the Hebrews were a group of people, immigrants to Canaan in about 15th century BC. So one of these tribes came to Egypt And because of its relationship with the royal family of Egypt, with the pharaonic family, first through Joseph, who became a minister, one of the ministers of Pharaoh.
This is the Joseph with his multicolored
Joseph with the multicolored coat.
Okay.
And then again with Moses, who was brought up in the royal palace. It's because of this connection between this Hebrew tribe and the royal family of Egypt that they became important. That Moses, the great hero and prophet of the Jews, was born in Egypt, brought up in the royal palace. He got the Ten Commandments, the Bible. He received the Bible on Mount Sinai, the Egyptian Sinai. So, and then after coming to Egypt as a tribe, insignificant tribe, they went out as a nation. So I thought that the whole root of whatever was going on must have taken place in ancient history. In our country, they came as a Hebrew tribe, they left as an Israeli nation. So what happened? And I thought that this conflict that didn't seem to be an ordinary political conflict, because if you have a disagreement, Germany and France had a disagreement during the war. However, after the war, they became friends. So we were not able, and maybe still are not able until now, to discuss it together and come to a conclusion and become friends. So I thought there must be some kind of taboo which lies in our common ancient history. So I decided to see, I mean, if these biblical stories, which are, by the way, the same stories in the Quran, Moses, Joseph, and Jesus, all these stories are the same, almost the same in the Quran. So we believe in it in the same way. So if these stories were just kind of fairy tales to justify belief, or was it, I mean, does it have historical roots? Is it historically correct, or it's just fairy tales? Because nowadays, I mean, people, humanities in the West, in our countries as well, seem to have a split character. When we think of medicine or economics, or we think scientifically. We rely on proof, evidence that we can have and touch. However, when we talk about any religious subject, it's a matter of I mean, like a dream, like a fairy tale. Because of this situation, it's okay if you believe in God, if you believe in magic, if you believe in whatever you want to believe in. Belief really, for me, is an individual thing. It is not a social thing. Everybody has a right to believe in whatever they want to believe in.
Absolutely.
However, our social life, our history, our common life has to be to rely not on belief, which is personal, but on something common that we can all rely on, which is science and historical knowledge. What I decided to do is, eventually, is to come to London, to come to England, hoping that I can make some research and study. And at the time, I thought, you see, that maybe this connection between Bible stories and history of Egypt have been resolved. I thought so. But when I came here, I realized that in fact it was something new. And there was a different kind of disagreement. And then no character of the Bible, Moses, for instance, Joseph, and they were not identified where they lived and who, under which pharaoh, and which, there was disagreement. The only thing is what the Ten Commandments, the film of, I mean... the
one with Charlton Heston in.
Charlton Heston is that is the pharaoh of oppression was Ramses II and so on. This is the general popular idea, but no evidence of anything have been established. So I had to go through with an evening course in London University to study ancient Egyptian history for 3 years, then ancient language hieroglyphic reading for about another 3 years. after that, I could find nothing as well, so I went to the British Museum library. It was a British Museum before it moved out. And I started research, my own research. I realized that the translation of the Bible, of the book of Genesis, where the story of Joseph is, and the book of Exodus, Moses' story, is sometimes the English King James translation does not fit the Arabic translation. So I thought I better go to the Hebrew text. So I had to teach myself a little bit of Hebrew. And Hebrew, being a Semitic language, is not difficult for me because it is similar in many ways to Arabic. And in many ways, the book of Exodus to Egyptian colloquial language. So I was able to do that. After a long research, I was sitting one day, it was cold winter, midnight. My wife and my daughter went to bed, and I went to bed with them. However, I got up, I couldn't sleep. So I didn't want to wake them up. I just put on the fire, make myself a cup of tea, and I sat down by the fire reading the story of Genesis, the story of Joseph in Genesis, as I had read it before many times. But on that night, I saw a clue that I didn't see before. It was the story of Joseph when his brothers came for the second time to get wheat for the family because they didn't have enough rain in Canaan. So when they came for the second time, Joseph invited them to have a meal with him in his house. He let him sit alone, and he sat on his own, and the Egyptian attendants sat on their own, and they have a meal. But in an emotional moment, he felt he wanted to reveal his true identity to them. He recognized them being the same Bedouin, and they didn't recognize him. He was now an Egyptian, dressed in Egyptian, talk in Egyptian, and he talked to them through an interpreter. So he asked his Egyptian attendant to leave the place, and he revealed his identity. I am your brother, Joseph. So they felt ashamed of themselves. They sold him into slavery, and he's treating them well, and so on. And they tried to apologize. So he told them, it is not you who brought me here. It's God who brought me here and made me father to Pharaoh. Father to Pharaoh. This moment, I had read it many times before, but I realized that this was an Egyptian title. Eat Neter en Neptawi, the Holy Father of the Lord of the Two Lands. And this was a very rare situation because Pharaoh usually is the father. I mean, if Pharaoh appoints some official or minister in some area, look, he has a title, the son of Pharaoh, over this area. So usually the son of Pharaoh. Tutankhamun was about 19 when they appointed somebody in Nubia about 80 years, and he had the title of son of Pharaoh. So how come this is the father of Pharaoh? This is a very rare situation. And it is in this case, we had only one character who had this title. He's called Yuya. He was a minister of Amenhotep III, the father of Akhenaten, Amenhotep III. So, and the reason he had this title is that Amenhotep III, Pharaoh Amenhotep III, married the daughter of his minister Yuya. He married her and made her his queen. So he is the father-in-law of the king. That's why he got this very rare title, you see. So I could not sleep until the morning when I went to the library and got the book of Yuya's tomb and so I realized that everything to do with Joseph, I found it in Yuya's. First of all, Yuya, his name is written in his tomb. His tomb was found in 1905 in the Valley of the Kings. He's buried among the royalties, he and his wife. And there's nothing on the walls of the tomb, only on the boxes, information. Right. His name was written on different boxes, different items of the furniture or tomb furniture. In every case, his name was spelled differently. Right. Sometimes Yaya, sometimes Yuyu, sometimes Yuya, and so on. So it must be rule thought that the reason for that must be that this guy was a foreigner, and the scribes who wrote the things did not agree on how to spell his name, you see. But anyhow, every name, every time he's called, is called the Y-A, Y-O, U, U, Y-E. So it's a Yod in Hebrew, Yod, which is the name of Yahweh, Jehovah, Yahweh. So because the Egyptians usually relate a person in his name to his god, or Ra, Mos, to Hud, and so on. So they must have related this foreigner to his Yahweh God.
Right.
You see, this is what they thought. And then I realized in this thing that Joseph is Joseph in Hebrew and in Arabic. It must have been, his name must have been a combined name of two elements, because also in the story of Joseph, when Pharaoh appointed him in his position, he gave him an Egyptian name started with Seth, Yosef.
Yep.
Seth is an Egyptian part. And we have a story written by later Manetho during the Ptolemies, 3 centuries BC, relating that Amenhotep III has a minister called Seth.
Yep.
When we know that he had a minister called Yu. So Yusef must have been the same name, you see.
Right.
So I was able to come to identify Joseph as the same character of Yuya, who was a minister of Amenhotep III.
Right.
And Amenhotep III married his daughter, Queen Tai, who brought Akhenaten. Here,
so you've got a distinct link. You've got the name and you've got the father of Pharaoh working together perfectly.
Not only this, there are only other two things. When Pharaoh, according to the Bible, appointed Joseph in his position, he gave him 3 things. A golden, his ring, because he's a minister, he has to sign, his ring, a golden necklace, and a small chariot. The 3 things were found in the tomb of Yuya.
So you've got tangible evidence too.
Yeah. Not only that, but Yuya was the first person in Egypt to be appointed as general of the chariots. The chariots.
Right.
Yeah. Because the Egyptians started to use chariots from the beginning, almost the beginning of the 18th dynasty. However, the chariots, because they were just starting, they were part of the army, not didn't have a separate kind of force. Yeah. But from the time of Yuya, they became separate, part of the army, and they had a general, and Yuya was the first thing. And in the Bible, we have a story saying that Joseph, when Jacob, his father, came with the Israelites, he went out with the chariot to meet them. When Jacob died and he went out to Canaan to bury his father, he took the chariots with him. So he is, I mean, Yuya is responsible for the chariots. It is evident that Joseph was responsible. The king gave him a chariot at his appointment as a sign of his job. So this is...
it's a serious build-up of evidence, isn't it?
Serious historic, I mean, archaeological evidence. This is the first time we have these chariots of war. So now I had established the first link between a biblical character. I have been able to identify a biblical character in history of Egypt. I started to see the next step, Moses, you see. And the point is if you think about the Bible, they make a lot of separation on time between Joseph and Moses. They say the end of the book of Genesis says Moses died, and the beginning of the book of Exodus says, and now a new Pharaoh rose in Egypt who did not know Joseph, and then start the oppression of the Israelites. You think there is too much difference. And the book of Exodus, when I try to identify Moses, I have to identify, you see, I have to prove that Moses and Akhenaten lived at the same time in the same place.
Right, yeah.
We have to prove time and place.
Yeah.
Otherwise, if there's similarity in his teaching alone, it doesn't make the two people the same.
No.
It can be similar.
Yeah.
If I mean, they have to have lived in the same time and the same place, same address. This is the only way. Like the police nowadays, they follow the same system to identify people. So what I tried to do first, the book, to see the time when Moses was born. I know now that Joseph was a minister of Amenhotep III.
Yeah.
But in the book of Exodus, when Moses took the Israelites out, and I think in chapter 3 of Exodus, they say, and now the Israelites have dwelt in Egypt for 430 years. So it makes 4 centuries and 30 years between Joseph, who brought the Israelites in, and Moses, who took them out. 430 years is a long time, so I have no case. However, when I started to study this thing, I realized that this is not really the case. Because in Genesis, there's another account when I think chapter 15 in Genesis, when Abraham, God told Abraham in a dream. You see, the patriarch used to worship on the top of a mount, and they get some blocks of stone, they put it together in a pile, and they put some oil on top of that, and they sleep the night next to it, and they think in a vision or in a dream God will communicate with them. So Abraham had a situation, and in the dream his God told him that your descendants will be strange in this strange country, but they will return to Canaan in the 4th generation. So then between Abraham and the Exodus is only 4 generations. And if we can see it, you see, the children of Jacob, we have 4 generations between. We have Levi, we have Kohath, we have Amram, and we have Moses. It's 4 generations, between 4 generations. If you were to add the ages, according to the Bible, of the 4 generations, we find that Levi lived for 137 years, Kohath for 133 years, and the total of the 4 generations come to about 525 years.
Right.
But because Levi came down to Egypt with his father at the age about 56, so the 56 years can deducted because he was living in Canaan. And because Moses is supposed to have lived while he was 80, and he lived 40 years in the wilderness of Sinai, if you take this and this, you come to the figure of 430 years.
Right.
So it is not possible to imagine that every generation brought his next son, his first son, at the same day he died, when he was 100. It doesn't make sense.
Yes.
So the first generation, and now even biblical scholars agree on that. They said, one of them said, a senior scholar in he died now in Israel. he said that it is because the Bible narrator want to emphasize the suffering of each generation on his own, and they added this, but this cannot be regarded as. So if 4 generations, from the time somebody is born until the time he begets his first son, you can say about 15 to 20 years, no more than that. So 4 generations is about 80 years, no more than that. So in this case, I was able to come near. Now look at Akhenaten. Now, the thing is, Amenhotep III, this is the whole root of the taboo between Egypt and Israel. It's a descendant, a son of a common marriage. A king marries a Hebrew girl and produces a son. Is he a son of the king, Egyptian king, or of the Hebrew girl? The two claim and disclaim. This is the root of the whole problem. And what helped me in this case is really Sigmund Freud. Freud, in his last book, which he wrote here in Hampstead, when he emigrated from Austria because of the persecution, Nazi persecution of Hitler, he wrote his last book called Moses and Akhenaten. In the first section, he argued that in fact Moses was an Egyptian. And because, you see, he thought that the story of the birth of Moses is repeated in different
It is, yeah, absolutely.
Like Oedipus, when a child is born to a family under threat on his life, is smuggled away to be living with another family. Some Romulus of Rome is said to have been smuggled to, and the king of Agag is the same situation, and Oedipus of the Greeks was smuggled to it. But Freud realized that in all these cases, the baby was born to a high status, to a royal family. And because there's a threat against the royal family, and obviously the child is the heir, is smuggled to be brought up by a poor family. When he grows up, he realizes his true identity, and he comes back to claim the throne. This is the usual thing. Except in the case of Moses, he's born in the poor family, smuggled to the... He said this switch must have been deliberate in order to... because, you see, during the time of Joseph, the Israelites and the Egyptians were friends. During the time of Moses, it was different because there was disagreement. So he said that it is natural that the scribes didn't want to make the hero an Egyptian. This is what made me think about that. However, my conclusion is that he was not, because Akhenaten was denied even by the Egyptians as well. By both sides, really, because it's the same situation. Because he was half Egyptian. I mean, he was the son of Amenhotep III, the royal king. He's the son of Tai, the daughter of Joseph, the Hebrew patriarch. So this is the main situation. So I realized that here, and it is very strange that Akhenaten, when he comes to the throne, his father associated him as a co-regent first, and then he started building his own temple for one god with no image. And when his father died, he closed all the temples in Egypt except the temple of Aten. Aten means the light of the power of the sun. And only one god is with no image, the same kind of... And if you look at all the beliefs of Moses and Akhenaten, you find exactly the same. Even the Ten Commandments. The Ten Commandments, don't steal, don't... because Akhenaten, destroyed the whole Egyptian pharaonic beliefs, he could not. I mean, we have in the Book of the Dead we have a chapter that when the dead person deceased goes to the hall of Osiris to be judged, he has to make confessions. He has to say, I haven't killed anybody, I haven't stolen anything, I haven't. So because Osiris is no longer one of the gods, it's only one god for Akhenaten, he took the same moralities and he put it in his negative thing. I mean, in his imperative thing. Don't do that, don't do that. But the same Ten Commandments. I mean, all the beliefs of Moses and Akhenaten are the same. However, this enough, the similarities in belief are not enough to make them the same person. As we said, we have to so the cornerstone now is to identify the time of Exodus.
Yep.
If the Exodus have taken place during the time of Akhenaten, then we have a point. Now, what we know is that Akhenaten ruled for 17 years, you see, and that after that he disappeared. The general idea, belief among the scholars, is that he died, but there is no evidence that he died. The tomb where he was building for himself, he was never buried there. No other tomb was found with Akhenaten's body. It didn't exist. So although Tutankhamun, his son, followed him on the throne, and he would have buried him in his tomb, there's no evidence that he was ever buried in his tomb.
Right.
So, he has a title. I mean, after the Amarna disappearance, they fell from power. This new religious, they forbade the names in official documents in Egypt. No name of Akhenaten or Tutankhamun could be mentioned. But if they have to talk about something that took place during Akhenaten's time, they have to relate to him as the fallen one of Amarna, the one who fell in Amarna. So it indicates a falling from power, you see. And there are indications that Akhenaten, after the end of his rule, 17 years, he was still alive. And not only that, he went to Sinai, to Sarabit al-Khadim, temple of Sinai, and he stayed there. Petrie was able to find the head, stone head of his mother Tai in over there, as well as evidence of Semitic worship in that tomb. Petrie found that. So also, very strange, although the Bible doesn't say it, the Talmud, which is a very important book of the Hebrews, of the Israelites, says that Akhenaten, that Moses, after killing the Egyptian, did not go to Sinai directly. He first went to the south. Ethiopia, they say the south. And where he became a king, he married the queen, and he became a king for 9 years. And then he had to abdicate the throne, and the queen he married is called Adunet. Adonet. Atun is Adonai, you see. The queen, and he had to abdicate the throne for the queen's son and leave for Sinai. So the story, which is very strange, why should the Talmud disagrees with the Bible unless there was a strong tradition indicating that Moses was a king, became a king. So there is some different indication of that. However, we want archaeology, because archaeology is the strongest evidence. When did the Exodus take place? The Exodus means that there was a Semitic element that left Egypt, or trying to leave Egypt, into Canaan. This is the evidence. And the only evidence we have, only one evidence, all the history of Egypt, we have only one evidence to indicate that some Semites were trying to leave Sinai to enter Canaan. And this took place when Ramses I, who established the 19th dynasty, Ramses I died immediately, and his successor was Seti I. He got news that some rebellion of Bedouin tribes in Sinai, and they were trying to leave Sinai to Canaan. So he left his father being mummified, and because he has to go through 70 days, and he went there. He fought against these people. He defeated them, and he went to Canaan and brought them back into Egypt, you see. He slaughtered them under the feet of Ammon, his god, and so on. So this took place, you see. If Akhenaten didn't die after his reign, and he went to Sinai, after about 25 years of his reign, the evidence of the Hebrew, of the Semitic elements leaving, the only evidence of Semites trying to leave into Canaan took place in the time of Ramses I, who is about 25 years from. Now, let us see why Moses, why Akhenaten came back to claim his throne. What happened is this rod that they say comes a snake.
Yeah.
In fact, the rod of power in Egyptian pharaohs was a snake. It looks like a snake, and when you turn it around, it tears out a snake. So it's not a snake. It's not only a rod. This is the sign of power.
Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah, and whenever somebody had, Akhenaten must have taken into exile with him this sign of power. Otherwise, when he came back, when the last pharaoh of the 18th dynasty, Horemheb, died, he had no heir. You see, so Ramses I, Ramses, who became Ramses I, was his general, the general of the army, and he wanted to take the throne. Now, Bible say that Moses was told that those people who wanted you are dead, come back. And he came back. Imagine a Bedouin guy coming to enter the palace of Pharaoh. He would not be allowed to threaten Pharaoh. But if he has the sign, this rod, which is the sign, nobody will stop him. He is the son of God. I mean, according to Egyptian tradition. So he was able to go and challenge. And there is a story in the Quran that is not in the Bible, that Pharaoh decided to accept the challenge, and he asked for the wise men, which are the priests, to come in a feast and decide between him and Moses and Akhenaten, you see, and Moses in this case. And then when they saw the stick, the serpent of Moses, the whole priest accepted the authority of Moses. So it seems that there was a power struggle. So in this case, Ramses, being the general of the army, he made a kind of a coup d'etat. He forced the thing, and Moses, Akhenaten, has to flee. He failed in his attempt to regain his throne, so he had to leave. Now, in the area of Gassan, Goshen, the Bibles call it. It is somewhere near the Kantara East in Egypt, over the Suez Canal. It's the only crossing between, it has been, now there are many crossings, the ancient crossing between Egypt and the road to Canaan, you see. At the time, this area was surrounded by water, lake from Manzala from the north, and Lake Ismailia Timsah from the south. But this lake, the water is not very high. So if you want to escape, you can, walking, you can go through the lake. You don't have to have a magic opening the water. And obviously, the story makes it more dramatic. However, if ordinary Moses and his people went through the water, it can only get them, they can go through. However, when the Egyptians followed them with the chariots got stuck in the mud, in the thing. They couldn't go. And if you accept the miracle, you can accept it. But there is a scientific explanation, because they have now with satellites recognized the area that was water surround all. So to go out, you see, if you go out to Egypt, it's you have a post, army post guarded, you cannot go this way. If you want to escape, the only way is the other side, and the other side was water, and you can go through. So we came to the conclusion that, in fact, Moses and Akhenaten were one and the same people, and that although, as Muslims, we accept that Moses was a prophet of God, however, in reality, a lot of Egyptians were very worried about the fact, not ordinary Egyptians, by the way, these fanatics, not even the fanatics in this case. This is some intellectuals who thought, how come, and this is the thing that show the root of the thing. How can we have an Egyptian king who have a mixed blood with the Israelites? So I couldn't understand that, but for a lot of time until recently, they have been attacking me in Egypt because of this. How can I dare to? I mean, we accept Moses as it is. He's a whole Jew, but if he is half Jew, half Egyptian, it is a taboo for them, the mixed blood. Although Egyptians by nature are not. I mean, they don't have this kind of beliefs. But this is the idea. When you have I mean, Moses, even Moses, after he died, from the Israelite side, they rejected his beliefs when they went. They claimed that he was treating them badly and so on, and they went back to the worship of the Canaanite gods until when later on Nebuchadnezzar of Babylon, the Babylonian king, got the king of Judea and the priests into captivity in Babylon, and then they sat down by the
waters of Babylon. We're going to have to sit down by the waters of Babylon again at some other point, because we've come to the end of the show.
Yes.
And I probably asked, what, one question?
Please.
Throughout the entire thing?
Please.
Thank you very much for coming on the show. So if people want to know more, we've got 10 seconds. People want to know more. Moses and Akhenaten is the book. There are several other books to go for. It's from Bear & Company in the States, this version. But I'm sure if they go to Amazon and type this in, they'll be able to get hold of it. Thank you very much for coming.